All right, welcome back to Moments of Solace After Dark, where we.
Somebody needs to start paying us for this.
I know,
It's
so we can
tiring.
afford a nanny, so we don't have to do this at night after like 11 o'clock. So, the topic for today was the idea of luck versus hard work, right?
Okay.
Which I think is something that I think a lot of people sort of argue about. And I know you and I have actually had this conversation in the past. I don't know if you remember it, but we
I
definitely
mean, you remind
disagreed,
me all the time, so I remember it.
and we disagreed on it then. I think we still disagree on it to a degree now. But how much does one or the other play in success, in your opinion, and just in general, like, go from there.
You want to share your stance on it first, so I can tell you if I agree with it or not. Still.
Sure. I mean, for me, I think too many people. Well, my thought on it first is that I think one doesn't exist without the other,
Yes,
right?
I mean that's true.
And I find it odd that so many people are unwilling to admit that luck played a role in their success, and not odd per se, but really just I think it plays deeply into a lot of people's insecurities about, like, if I admit that luck played a factor into my success, then I'm somehow less than, or my success is somehow tainted, right?
But how would you even measure luck, though?
Well, I don't think you need to measure it, right?
Like
But how? Because
if
also, how do you
there's
measure
a
hard
there's a
work?
lot of people that are like that work really hard, and luck isn't really in the equation. But
But
you know what I mean? Like they like things happen to them back to back to back to back to back to back to back, and they somehow still come out on top. Would you consider that like being just resilient and just being a
yeah, I
hard
mean, I don't
worker,
think that any of those
or would
things
that be
are
considered lucky?
exclusive to
Because
each
in
other.
their heads, they're not lucky.
No, I don't think any of those things are mutually exclusive, right? I think, or rather, I think all those things are mutually exclusive, is what I meant to say. Because I think luck can be its own thing, like where you're born, what race you are, how much money your family has when you're born, like all of those things. That's just on day one. That's luck, right? How many people do we know? Like, where I grew up, I know so many hard workers who will never leave that state, right? Guys who work way harder than I do, right? Who will never leave that state. So, like, obviously hard work isn't the only factor, right? Which is also like, and I don't think you know I don't think that takes away from people's struggles,
Yeah.
right? Because the things you have to go against to fight against, to persevere, is a huge factor in that, right? So, like, that was sort of my quick take on it. There's a lot more we can go through on it, but I want your.
No, I mean I agree with you. I think luck and hard work do go hand in hand. So I don't know, like what part of that do you think they disagreed on?
Well, I mean, I think in the past you never liked admitting the factor of luck, right? Like
Yeah,
the
I
idea
mean,
that somebody helped you was a problem for you.
well, I think that comes from being undermined, right? And how you are and what your environment is like, right? So for me, like I hate saying it now too. For me, like ever since I've been in this space, ever since I've graduated college, even before graduating college, like every step of the way, it's been like, I possibly can't achieve something because I worked hard for it, right? People weren't paying my bills. People weren't paying for my, like we were paying for tuition. I was working like 3 jobs. I, you know, did a lot of different like roles. And I think we recently spoke about it, where I was like doing so many different jobs that didn't even make sense. Right? I was working in retail, but I was also a banker, but then I was also all of those things, right? But for some reason, people always perceived me as somebody who just got things handed to them versus I worked hard for it. And I think because of that, I've always been so hesitant in talking about how I got where I got. And I think it wasn't until like almost 6 years ago, I think it was maybe like 2 years into our marriage where like the I started getting comfortable with admitting that people have opened the doors for me. And I think like I started becoming even more vocal about it when I was in New York, and then in social media space, a lot of women that gave me the opportunities were like brown women behind closed doors, right? And that's when I realized, like, it doesn't matter what people think, right? Because you are still working hard. But at the same time, there's somebody who's paving the way and opening that door for you. And there's nothing wrong with that. What
Yeah.
you do with that opportunity is completely up to you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But even now, I still sometimes get into my head about that because I'm like, it happens to me now too, right? Like the jobs that I've gotten, the campaigns I've worked in. This is outside of social media, like I'm working in this startup world, being a creative consultant, and doing all the things that I have done. For some reason, it's not because I've worked hard to have those opportunities and maintain those opportunities, but more so because she got it because X person works there, or she got it because somebody paid for it, or like it's never been about I work hard, I have an income, I'm contributing to our household. It's never been those things. And it's quite frustrating to constantly hear that when you're putting in work. So while I've become more grateful to people that have contributed to my success, and I've been so blessed, and I acknowledge that I've been so lucky in so many ways, it's hard to kind of break free from that idea, right? Because it's constantly being fed to you at every step of the way.
So I guess the question I have is like, before you started getting comfortable
Yeah.
with, I guess, admitting that or discussing the fact that there was helping hands along the way, did you believe that it was just your hard work, or did you know it wasn't just your hard work, but you couldn't admit it out to people because of the perception that you were being handed things?
I mean, there were a lot of opportunities that came early on that weren't because I was working hard. Like yeah, I put in work, but I wouldn't
No,
say
but I'm
that
saying even before that, right? Even before we got married,
yeah.
right? Let's go back pre-content creation, because I think content creation, and everybody will, a lot of people have their thoughts on it. I think content creation is like 90% luck,
Yeah.
right? That's my personal take on it, but whatever. But
I'm
let's
gonna
go.
fight you on that.
Yeah, a lot of people, I'm sure.
I'm gonna
Look,
fight you on that.
yeah, and look, it's but that's the thing, right? It's like we'll get to that, but let's go pre content creation life, right? How did you ever look at it and say, oh gosh, like I got lucky, but then I worked hard, or was it always just like, no, 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 I worked hard, I worked hard, I worked hard?
I worked hard. I didn't think about it like that.
Okay.
I wasn't like, oh my god, I'm so lucky.
Yeah.
I'm working so hard. I was like, like luck's not there. I'm working hard.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying, but
Because
like
to me, it was like it's hard. Like it's such a difficult thing to like even like to think that they all go hand in hand, right?
yeah,
Because like to me, it's like everybody. I was surrounded by people whose parents were paying for tuition, or who like got scholarships and stuff, and then like we couldn't afford to pay tuition, so like we had to work. And so for me it was like the luck isn't there, so we have to like bust our rear ends.
yeah.
So at that point in my life, no, I did not think I got lucky.
Do you ever look back at that now and shift the way you thought about even those moments? Or is it still like, oh, no, 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 like that at that point in my life, there was zero luck?
I absolutely think at that point in my life it was zero luck.
So like when you think back at like all the jobs you had,
Yeah.
all the jobs you got, you don't ever think about like the fact that somebody took a chance on you? That when you went into a bank and applied to be a loan advisor, that somebody decided to take a chance on you with no experience in the space?
But I had experience.
You did not. Not as a bank teller. Or not, sorry, as a loan officer.
But I think I had a customer service experience, and that's what they needed.
That's what they were willing to accept.
I mean, yeah, yes, people took a chance on me.
But isn't
But
that
at
luck,
the
right? That's what I'm
like,
saying,
but
right?
that is
I
it really
think
luck though?
it
Like,
is. Of course it is. If that person, look, my first job I got because I went to ice cream with my sister and her friends,
I
and
mean,
there was
if
a
you
guy
really
there.
want to go down that road, like
But I think
then yes,
that's
we
the
can
reality
talk.
of it, right? Like I think that's the to me, and that's where I think, and I think this is actually why people are afraid to give other people flowers as well, right? Because there's this notion of like finite success and finite credit to go around. It's like, oh no. If I give that person credit, I don't get any, right? Oh, if I share the secret to
Yeah, but at
success,
the same time,
then
like,
there's less success for me. And I
I
think
mean, if
that is the reason so many people like because Wahab, and shout out Wahab, man. I don't know if you're listening to this, but like he literally we went to get ice cream and he called me one day, got my number from my sister, called me and was like, hey man, are you looking for an internship? And I was like, oh yeah. And then that led me to an internship where of course I worked hard, I freaking killed it, right? Got my job and all that stuff. Like, but that would have never have happened if this dude just randomly pay attention to me at ice cream with my sister and her friends,
okay, so
right?
let me give you the scenario, right? Like, you tell me if you can change my narrative
Oh
on it.
gosh, yeah.
No, seriously, like I want to talk about it.
Mhm.
So when we moved to the U.S., I
Yep.
was 12 years old, and my mom did not have a job.
Yep.
And I was in the after school program for YMCA. And I'm like, what, in middle school at this
Yep.
point? Yeah. So I'm in middle school, and we did after school program. And I remember the person, Jan Lawton. I love that woman. She, Lord bless her. She was such a amazing person. But like, I remember my mom was looking for a job because dad was working long hours, and she couldn't find a job. And there was like this like essay contest that you write an essay for, and I wrote this contest, and it was about like how hard it was for immigrant parents to find jobs in the US.
Yep.
And I wrote that letter. I guess Jan, read it, and then she passed it to somebody at the YMCA, and then they read it, and they wanted to bring mom in for an interview. I'm 12 years old.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my mom wouldn't have like gotten this interview if I didn't like cry my eyes out in this letter.
Yeah.
But what part of that would be like,
The whole first part of it. That you met this woman who happened to be this super amazing soul, who happened to be the person who read that letter and decided that the letter. Because look, at 12 years old, I'm sure you were no Shakespeare.
oh, maybe I was. I'm
Right?
a pretty good,
But at
a
12,
good storyteller.
right? But at 12, when you first moved here from Pakistan, were you George Orwell? Right?
Wow, you're hurting my feelings.
But that's
yes,
not,
I get it.
right? But like that's what I'm saying is that like along the way, it's not, and that's I think that's the misconception so many people have is that like somehow Jan being involved and being the person and like the luck of like somebody who genuinely resonated with your story, somehow admitting that would take away from the fact that you wrote the letter.
I mean, yeah.
Right? And I think that's what I'm saying is like I think it goes into this notion, this really weird notion of like finite credit, finite success. And we see it all the time right now, right? In the content creator world where like everybody's gatekeeping. Everybody keeps their contacts close to the chest. Look, there's enough checks to go around. There's enough brands for everybody to be involved in, right? But like for some reason, everybody's like, well, no. If this person gets successful, then I won't get success. It's like, what do you mean? There's success for all of us to go around, right? There's credit for all of us to go around. You still wrote the letter. Mad props to you for writing that letter, taking the initiative. But if Jan didn't read it, would your mom have gotten the job?
Okay. I mean, for a point, look, I look at that part of my life because it was such a
No, I
crazy
get
part of
it.
my life. It's hard to think that like luck played a role in it because you're constantly trying to make ends meet. And I watched my parents do that, for a very long
Yeah.
time. And then my siblings and I had to do that.
Yeah.
And so, like, we didn't really, like, we're not the type of family that just sat back and just ate. Like, even now, my parents work really hard.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's hard for me to like kind of think of that part of my life as like luck had something to do with it. But you're right. Like, if you look back, yes, there people opened doors. People did take a chance on me, and you know, all I'm saying is it's hard.
Yeah, I know. And I think that's what I'm trying to get to is that, like, a lot of it sometimes is just gratitude.
Like I said earlier, that yes, like luck definitely does play a role in the places that you go. But I'm also saying that for people, sometimes it's hard to determine where luck came in,
Yeah.
right? Because, if people can't make ends meet, it's hard to find yourself be lucky.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and
And,
I don't think lucky is the same thing as
but
luck.
people would, yeah, okay.
Because lucky, I think a lot of people look at their life sort of as a straight line path
Yeah.
from like where I am to where I think I want to be.
But do you think that it also, like, all comes down to how people perceive other people? Like, you know, people measure other people's success on their own scales, right? And that makes it harder for people to really be grateful about things, right? So, for instance, like, you know, a woman does really well in the things that they do, right? Whether it's career, having a home, bringing in income, having side hustles, and all those things, right? And there's like a handful of people, and they're just like, this person's living off their husband's money,
Yeah.
right? Just because they don't see the day to day, it's easy to assume that they're living off of like a husband's money kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
It's when you're put in that situation, it's hard for you to it's hard for you to not say I work hard,
Yeah.
right? Like your initial reaction is I work hard. What do you mean, right? And there's like no room for you to talk about like, hey, I did get lucky with the opportunities that I have, right? And I think that's what I'm trying to say. Like, even it took me a little while to appreciate and be grateful for the opportunities that I've had and people that have opened the door for me. The environment, people have made it really hard to not talk about I work hard,
Yeah.
you know.
But I think, look, obviously, everybody's perspective is going to be different in large part because like I'm not the person being told that I'm not working hard, right? So who am I to say what somebody else should feel or say, right? But to me, if you get in front of it, right, what is anybody else going to say? Like, if you're just like, yo, like, yeah, like I had the support of my spouse, husband or wife, doesn't matter. I had the support of my spouse, and thanks to them, I was able to do blank. And then from that, I was able to make blank out of it. What's anybody going to say?
Yeah.
Right? From there, someone's, oh, well, you're living off your husband, or you're living off your wife. Yeah, no, for a
Which I
little while
also
I
don't think there's
was.
anything wrong.
Yeah, like,
There
look, the
is that.
traditionalist in me, like, especially when you talk about, like, living off your husband, like, the traditionalist in me is like, okay, but, like, that's his job,
Yeah.
right? My job is to make sure you can do whatever it is you want to do in your life,
Yeah.
right? That's my, as despite all of my other thinking, like, that's the pressure I put on myself. So, like, I don't feel like that's that as an insult, like, oh, you're living off your husband. Thank you for thinking that I can support my wife. Like, what? But at the end of the day, right, husband, wife, or otherwise, like, if your spouse's job is to support you, being able to admit that your spouse supported you as you journeyed through something, I don't think is a weakness,
Yeah.
right? And if you're able to admit it on the outset, what room does anybody have to say anything about it?
I think people are always going to have something to say about
Well,
everything.
that too.
Yeah. So even if like you do get ahead of people that have already made up their mind to like
Yeah, some people
know.
are just like, what are you gonna do about it?
language, people watching in their living rooms and their kids might be around,
I
okay?
know. I'll bleep it out.
But like, yeah, it's hard. It's hard to figure that out.
Yeah.
But all I would like to say while we're like kind of ending this off, like I remember, I think ever since I've stepped into adulthood, I remember every single person who's paved the way for me. And I can name them all, you know. So like, if we're really like, if you're watching it, Aditi who opened the doors for me.
Don't start doing this because you're gonna miss somebody along the way, and then that person's gonna get offended. Yeah.
Okay, we'll just
Don't
cut
do
it
that.
off.
But no, like no, I think in adulthood for sure, but like, and it's not really even about you. I think it was an interesting thing to me, and that you and I have discussed in the past, which is just like how much people clamor to take credit,
Yeah.
right? And how much people do a dance to avoid giving any.
Yeah, because if you give credit, then you're taking away from your hard work.
But are you? That's what I'm arguing.
Right, but I'm saying out loud what
Yeah.
like the thought process is, and then people have to like ask for credit, like
Yeah. Right. Like if we go all the way back to your example about Jan, right? By taking the stance that you took, or not the stance, but like by the viewpoint that you took of like it was just me, right? Do you think Jan ever felt some type of way? Being like she never actually appreciated what I did.
no. I've always thanked Jan. I still like Jan, and I will still talk.
No, I mean I know that your
Yeah.
guys' relationship, but like,
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
ever think she felt some type of way about being like, oh, like she doesn't truly understand
No,
how I changed her life?
I 100% know that she's changed our life. Like, she knows that I know that everybody knows that. I was stating it in a manner that, like, the initial, like, exchange of things that changed, like, finances in our house came from that,
Yeah.
And, like, after I turned 16, I was working camp at the YMCA. I went from a kid who attended camp to like,
Man, the Y should sponsor this episode.
but like, there was a lot, like, the YMCA really did
Yeah.
do a lot for me and my family. And it's hard to say that the staff that was there in place, like, we had free membership, we had extracurriculum, we had scholarships to attend these things. And so now that I'm saying this stuff out loud, I'm like, oh, yeah. Well, there you go. He's changed my narrative.
But I think it's healthy for one, right? I also think it's important.
Yeah.
Like I don't ever want, and it's like I think about it when I think about the girls, right? I don't obviously ever want them to think that they should make them feel they should never make themselves smaller, right? You put in your hard work, that credit is yours. But I also don't think you should minimize anybody else who was there along the way, right?
Yeah.
Even if you don't know who that person is.
Yeah.